This video is to help you complete the teaching strategies for the learning theory of behaviorism. Behaviorism is the first learning theory starting with classical conditioning with Pavlov's dog. If you may recall that from your beginning psych class, where a dog tended to salivate every time a researcher came into the room, and Pavlov began to explore that and found out that learning occurs by association. And behaviorists in general believe that if you can't observe it, then you can't measure it, and therefore it's a waste of time to look at it. And so they never looked inside a person's mind. They always looked at what happened in terms of behavior. So they came up with a set of learning principles that tended to explain how people acted. And so our first step is to describe a teaching strategy in our standards-based lesson plan that you think will support your students' learning via behaviorism. And we want you to do this in two parts. The first part is one that supports classical conditioning, because that's the earlier type of behaviorism, and then another teaching strategy that supports what's called operant conditioning. And please keep these two strategies separate so that we can distinguish between which ones you're talking about. If you find that the teaching strategy in your lesson plan is missing, not specific enough, then please develop it so that it will represent that teaching strategy. So for example, the teacher, for classical conditioning, the teacher found that bringing the group's attention using a clock timer's bell would represent classical conditioning. Then defend your teaching strategy of why it works. And again, do this in two parts. First one will be defending classical conditioning, and the second one will support your operant conditioning, and keep those separate. Think about this while you're defending. How does your teaching strategy actually work via classical conditioning? How does it work via operant conditioning? And you should review some of the text resources. First, review what maybe learning it is itself. You don't have to put this in your answer, but what is learning? What are some of the learning theorists? Then explore classical conditioning and even some strategies for classical conditioning. Then explore operant conditioning, and that's a lot bigger because this is a much more developed piece of behaviorism. And then defend it. So here's an example of somebody defending the classical conditioning when it is with the bell. And notice it's broken down into the pieces, before, during, and after, and it identifies which is the pieces of classical conditioning, such as unconditioned stimulus, neutral stimulus, and so on. And that way you will demonstrate that you understand how the classical conditioning works. Then you want to do that also for your operant conditioning. Then step 3, choose a behaviorist teaching strategy below that you think helps students learn best, and explain why you think that's the best strategy. So here's a whole bunch of words that go with behaviorism, and part of what you'll need to do in this week is understand a lot of those tasks, or a lot of those language, so that you'll become familiar with them and that you can apply them when you take the PLT test to become a certified teacher. So pick one and then talk about that and answer, and then pick another one in step 4. And then put that new one into your actual standards-based lesson plan so you can incorporate another idea. And then step 5 is choose one you think is ineffective. So you should also be able to criticize the theory and see what doesn't work. So those are 5 things that you want to do, and you can communicate these electronically. So if you want to do it by podcast, video, YouTube video, PowerPoint, you feel free to do that just like you could do with the other ones. And then go ahead and take a look at the student example model, the complete one, when you put the answer in your part 2. Let me go ahead and click on this real quick so that you get a chance to see it. So it's the same lesson plan you've been working with the whole time, and we're just expanding it. So you'll see that there's lines in here to show that there is additional information into our lesson plan. And if you go all the way to the bottom, there you'll see the classical conditioning, and then also the operant conditioning, the evaluating the learning theory, and the ineffective teaching strategy. And in this way, after 1 week, and that's all you need to do for the week, you'll have a great idea of how behaviorism works. So let's move on to the next one when you finish that.